fuck this money up, man. Now I'm about to let my little bro fuck the money up. They gonna give him like 200, 300? Yeah, that's the whole plan. That's why I'm out here, right?
NBA YoungBoy just dropped some jaw-dropping revelations about how Atlantic Records straight up finessed him out of what he says was a $300 million empire, and the story is wild.
Man, so NBA YoungBoy looking to sign a new deal soon.
We're talking about a young legend who built one of the biggest fan bases in hip-hop, only to end up trapped in what he calls modern-day slavery. This isn't your usual label beef. This is a full-blown expose on how the music industry is built to drain young black artists. YoungBoy didn't just speak up, he exposed the entire system, laying out how labels twist contracts and lock artists down for years. By the time you hear everything, you'll see exactly why he's warning every artist to never sign with Atlantic Records. Now let's break this madness down. NBA YoungBoy was already one of the most streamed rappers on earth, pulling crazy numbers online without a label pushing him.
And Birdman say the deal will be worth $200 to $300 million.
But what went down next? It wasn't just about losing money. It was about exposing an industry that profits off artists' pain while giving them crumbs in return. The label deals were built to benefit everyone except the person creating the music. And here's the craziest part. This didn't only happen to YoungBoy. It pulled the curtain back on how Atlantic has allegedly been running the same hustle on multiple artists, stacking millions while the real talent barely sees a fraction. To really understand how this so-called $300 million finesse happened, we gotta rewind to August 2017, when an 18-year-old YoungBoy made what would soon be one of the biggest mistakes of his entire career. Let's take it back to August 2017. At that time, NBA YoungBoy was already on fire, dropping mixtapes that were racking up millions of views on YouTube with zero label backing.
I ain't gonna lie, this looking like one of the biggest rap deals for a street rapper.
He was young, hungry, and ready to level up. So when Atlantic Records came knocking with what looked like a dream deal, it felt like his big break was finally here. But here's where the trap got set. They offered him a 5-album deal worth just $2 million, and it came through Mike Caron's artist partner group. Now think about that. 5 full albums for only $2 million. That's around $400K per album for an artist already dominating online with no label help. That's not a deal, that's a setup. This was straight up disrespectful. But YoungBoy was only 18, and like a lot of new artists, he was focused on that fast money, not realizing what he was giving up in the long run.
Usually we see like pop stars sign for this amount.
Timing played a huge role too. In 2017, he had just dropped 38 Baby and Mind of a Menace 3, both proving he was a real force in the rap game. His YouTube channel was blowing up and his street rep was already certified. Atlantic saw all that potential, but instead of building him up, they saw a way to control it. That's when the real red flags started showing. The contract straight up took his masters, meaning Atlantic would own every original recording forever.
You know how hard it is for a rapper to get a deal like this?
That's the most valuable thing an artist can have, because those masters make money for decades. When you don't own them, you're basically working for free while someone else cashes in off your creativity. And here's the slickest part. Atlantic had full control over what counted as an album and what didn't. That gave them power to stretch his contract, delay releases, and make sure he kept recording under their terms. It was a business move dressed up as an opportunity. And for an 18-year-old chasing his dream, it was the beginning of a nightmare. That one sneaky clause turned out to be the backbone of Atlantic's entire scam. They buried it deep inside the contract, written in slick legal language that most young artists wouldn't fully catch until it was way too late. On paper, YoungBoy's music was released under his own Never Broke Again label, which sounded like independence. But in reality, Atlantic still pulled every single string that mattered.
I gotta give him his props, man. This is insane. He put in the work overtime and it finally paid off.
The Never Broke Again brand was something YoungBoy built from the ground up. It was his mindset, his crew, his movement. But even though he created it, Atlantic set things up so they profited from every single piece of it. Even fans could see from the start that something wasn't right. Industry insiders were already whispering that giving him only $2 million for 5 full albums was basically robbery in broad daylight. But the machine was already rolling, and Atlantic had locked him in tight. What makes it even sadder is that YoungBoy had already proven he didn't need a label to win. His YouTube grind was his story. a kid from Baton Rouge pulling insane numbers completely on his own. He was building one of the most loyal fan bases in the game, people who would ride for him no matter what. But what he didn't know then was that his fans, that pure, organic loyalty, would become both his greatest strength and Atlantic's biggest target. After he signed a deal in 2017, YoungBoy went into absolute overdrive. He was dropping projects back to back like a machine. The man lived in the studio. It wasn't luck, it was pure work ethic. He was creating non-stop, feeding his supporters with new music every chance he got. But while he was focused on the grind, Atlantic was focused on control, and that's when they flipped the script completely. The biggest trick they pulled? The album versus mixtape loophole. This was next-level manipulation, something that would make a con artist proud. According to the fine print in the APG contract, and I quote, "The artist must submit at least 2 projects per calendar year, one of which may be classified as an album under the label's discretion." Sounds simple, right? But here's the real kicker. Anything YoungBoy dropped after those 2 projects would automatically be labeled a mixtape, meaning it wouldn't count toward his album requirement. Let that sink in. He could drop 10 projects in a year, but the label could decide only 1 or 2 actually counted toward his deal. That's not business. That's a setup disguised as opportunity. Man, Atlantic really played this one like a chess game. They had full control over what counted toward YoungBoy's 5-album deal, not him. That's some cold, calculated business right there, built to keep artists locked in contracts forever. While YoungBoy was grinding non-stop, dropping over 18 projects since 2017, Atlantic only counted 3 of them as official studio albums. Do the math. 18 projects released, but only 3 counted toward his deal, meaning 15 full projects that made Atlantic millions were labeled as mixtapes and didn't bring him any closer to freedom. That's wild. This kind of contract trickery should be straight up illegal, but in the music industry, it's just another day at the office. And here's where it gets even dirtier. The projects Atlantic refused to count as albums weren't some throwaways. They included some of YoungBoy's biggest hits. We're talking about AI YoungBoy, Until Death Call My Name, For Respect, Top, all records that racked up insane streaming numbers and made serious money. By any normal standard, each of these should have counted as full albums, but Atlantic had the power to say no, and that's exactly what they did. YoungBoy thought he was fulfilling his end of the deal, thinking each release was getting him closer to freedom, but the label just kept moving the goalpost. According to people in the industry, it was obvious that APG and Atlantic had every reason to keep him tied down as long as possible. They were milking him for music, using his constant output to stack profits while keeping him stuck under their thumb. And let's talk about the mental toll this kind of game can take. Imagine working your heart out, project after project, sleepless nights in the studio, believing you're finally close to getting what's yours, only to find out your so-called partners were playing you the entire time. That's betrayal on a whole different level. Most people would have crumbled under that kind of pressure, but YoungBoy, he kept going, refusing to let the system break him. And believe it or not, the craziest part of this story was still yet to come. But July 2020, YoungBoy had reached his breaking point, and that's when he made an offer to show just how greedy these labels really are. He went on Instagram and said, "I said they can have the next 4 albums free. All I want is my masters in." And what happened next? They still told him no. Dirty game for real. Let that sink in. This man literally offered to give Atlantic 4 full albums for free, albums worth tens of millions, just to finally own his own music, and they flat out refused. That right there proves it was never about money. It was about control and power. They didn't want YoungBoy to have ownership of his art. They wanted to keep him chained to that contract forever. Think about the money side of this for a second. 4 albums from NBA YoungBoy, given his massive fan base and crazy streaming power, could have easily pulled in $50 to $100 million in revenue. He was basically saying, "I'll work for free if you just let me go," and they still said no. That's wild. It tells you everything you need to know about what these labels really want. Not partnership, not fairness, but total control. That rejection pulled the mask off completely. Labels don't just want your current hits, they want your whole catalog, your legacy, your children's inheritance, even your grandkids' future. It's not enough for them to make money off your music today. They want to keep profiting off it for the next 100 years. It's ownership disguised as opportunity. Things really blew up when YoungBoy started calling them out in public. That's when the blackballing began, and it got ugly fast. The industry hates when artists expose their secrets, and they've got plenty of ways to make you pay for speaking the truth. By early 2022, YoungBoy wasn't holding anything back. He jumped online and dropped some serious truth bombs that shook the whole game. He posted, "Why blackball me? I'm the good guy. I was going #1 2 weeks straight with a mixtape, so they took it down off the charts. I don't give a..." And right there, you could feel the frustration pouring out. The message was loud and clear. The system wasn't built for artists to win, especially when they start realizing their worth. YoungBoy had done everything by the book, hit the top without the industry's help, and instead of celebrating him, they tried to erase him from the scoreboard. That's not business, that's punishment for breaking free. They're not gonna support you, especially if you live a certain way. That's what YoungBoy said, and he wasn't lying. He was talking about his project, Colors, and this was the moment Atlantic Records really showed their true colors, no pun intended. This mixtape was on fire, hitting #1 on Apple Music for 2 straight weeks and debuting at #2 on the Billboard 200. The numbers didn't lie. YoungBoy's fan base was unstoppable. He didn't need the industry's help to dominate the charts, and that right there scared him. But the second he started speaking up about his contract, things started looking shady. Fans noticed that Colors suddenly vanished from Apple Music, even though the deluxe version was still sitting on Spotify. It wasn't a glitch, and it wasn't some random licensing issue. This was deliberate sabotage, straight up blackballing, plain and simple. The message was crystal clear. If you speak out against the label, they'll do whatever it takes to knock you down. Atlantic was literally losing money on purpose just to teach them a lesson about staying quiet and playing by their rules. That's how petty and power-hungry these corporations can get when an artist challenges their control. The Colors situation was especially powerful because it proved something huge. YoungBoy didn't need the industry to win. He had no radio play, no label promo, no fancy marketing, yet he was still crushing artists who had the full machine behind him. His fan base was pure, loyal, and organic, the kind of following labels dream about. But instead of celebrating that, Atlantic did everything they could to silence it. And YoungBoy wasn't staying quiet either. He doubled down and kept exposing them, telling everyone that his music wasn't being promoted by the label, not even a little. He said Atlantic didn't lift a finger to support him. They just sat back and collected checks while he did all the work.
Think about how crazy that is. NBA YoungBoy was Atlantic's biggest streaming artist, building his entire empire through YouTube and pure fan loyalty, and the label was just cashing in without doing a thing to help. This exposed one of the biggest lies in the entire music industry, that labels are there to help artists grow. In YoungBoy's case, they weren't promoting him, pushing him, or protecting him. They were just profiting off him while trying to keep him under control. Atlantic wasn't lifting a single finger to support YoungBoy's career, but they were snatching up the majority of the profits from everything he built. They acted like straight-up parasites, feeding off his creativity, his grind, and his unstoppable work ethic. According to DJ Academics, NBA YoungBoy was pulling in nearly $17 million a year from his YouTube content alone. That's more than most major label artists make from all their income combined. Yet Atlantic, who did zero promotion and zero marketing, was still taking the biggest cut. That's beyond shady. That's straight parasitic. The YouTube stats say it all. YoungBoy didn't need some fancy label push. He created his own empire. He was connecting directly with fans, dropping music videos that hit millions of views within hours. His comment sections were packed with loyal supporters from all over the world, showing love and energy every single time he dropped. That's the kind of authentic growth you can't buy with industry money, and yet Atlantic had positioned themselves to profit from it all without doing a thing. Then YoungBoy revealed something even deeper. These labels don't just fail to help their artists, they sometimes work against them. He exposed how Atlantic banned his music from YouTubers, saying, "Atlantic banned my music from all YouTubers. Get a real job." He was pointing out how reaction channels and creators were making money off his content while he wasn't seeing a dime. Atlantic could have stopped that kind of exploitation easily, but they didn't, probably because they were getting paid too. The more YoungBoy spoke out, the more cracks started showing in the entire system.
This wasn't just a personal beef, it was a systemic issue. The music game was rigged to keep creators powerless, and now the truth was finally spilling out, loud and undeniable. The timing of these revelations was no accident. It was a coordinated strike. Multiple artists were hitting their breaking point all at once, and they decided to join forces to expose Atlantic's dirty business practices together. Meek Mill's story stood out because it showed exactly how labels manipulate release schedules just to keep artists under control, even when they've already fulfilled their contracts. That's not partnership, that's power play. This wasn't some random outburst from one frustrated rapper. This was turning into a full-blown movement. Artists like PNB Rock, Bad Baby, and Roddy Ricch started sharing similar stories about Atlantic's shady ways, and a pattern became impossible to ignore. The label had a history of targeting young, inexperienced artists with unfair deals, then draining them for years while pretending it was business.
PNB Rock's story hit especially hard. Before his tragic passing, he had openly spoken about feeling unsupported by Atlantic and frustrated with how they handled his career. Looking back, it's heartbreaking because his story showed just how much emotional and mental weight these artists carry while fighting a system that treats them like disposable products. His experience was a painful reminder of how industry pressure can destroy an artist's peace and well-being. Then came Bad Bobby, who offered another powerful perspective as a young female artist under Atlantic. Her rise to fame was controversial, sure, but she still faced manipulation and exploitation that highlighted how different layers of abuse exist in the industry. Her courage to speak out, despite knowing it could cost her opportunities, showed how dangerous it is to challenge these corporate powerhouses, especially as a woman in music. And YoungBoy wasn't done calling them out either. He went straight for the truth when he said, "Don't sign to Atlantic if you an artist. They not gonna support you, especially if you live a certain way." That one line cut deep because it exposed how labels love to profit off the image of street artists, but refuse to actually support them. They want the raw energy, the struggle, and the authenticity for marketing, but when it comes to real loyalty or investment, they vanish. That kind of discrimination runs deep in the industry. It's quiet, strategic, and deadly to real talent. Labels want the street credibility that makes an artist seem genuine, but they don't want to stand behind the people or communities those stories come from. It's exploitation masked as opportunity, using the culture for profit while turning their backs on the very artists who built it. Once the truth started spreading, the legal side of this whole situation began heating up fast. Industry insiders and lawyers started dissecting these contracts, and it became clear that what YoungBoy was describing might actually be challengeable in court. That Shady album versus mixtape loophole could fall apart under real legal scrutiny, especially since it showed clear signs of bad faith from the label. Entertainment attorneys began speaking out too, warning that these kinds of contracts were predatory by design, especially when they target young artists who don't have solid legal teams or business knowledge. The power gap between a major label and a young independent artist is massive, and that imbalance creates the perfect setup for exploitation to thrive. It's not just possible, it's practically built into the system. But while lawyers were debating the fine print, the streets reacted immediately. YoungBoy's loyal fan base, the 4KT movement, wasn't just sitting back watching, they went to war for him. Fans started boycotting Atlantic artists, flooding social media with the hashtag #FreeYoungBoy, and demanding real industry reform. The movement picked up crazy momentum, with independent artists jumping in to share their own label horror stories. The energy was different. It wasn't just online noise, it was organized resistance. These weren't casual listeners, these were die-hard supporters who understood exactly what was happening to their favorite artist and refused to stay silent. They launched streaming boycotts, social media campaigns, and even pulled up outside Atlantic's offices for protests. The whole thing turned into a real-world movement that the industry couldn't ignore. This entire situation changed the conversation about record deals forever. Fans were no longer just watching artists struggle, they were part of the fight. For the first time, people were questioning how these contracts work, why they're so one-sided, and how much power labels really have over creativity and ownership. YoungBoy didn't just expose Atlantic, he ripped the mask off the entire system.
He shined a light on the way the music business has been exploiting young black artists for generations, turning their art into billion-dollar profits while keeping them trapped. His courage to speak out, knowing full well the risks, kicked off a wave of conversations about artist rights, ownership, and accountability.
And when you really break down the numbers he revealed, the math is downright insane. His story became more than just a headline. It turned into a case study in contract manipulation, showing the world exactly how deep the exploitation runs in the music industry. When you look at the numbers, the picture gets even darker. YoungBoy signed a 5-album deal back in 2017, but by 2022, he had already dropped over 18 projects, with only 3 of them officially counting as albums. Industry experts ran the math and realized that if he kept going at the same pace, he could end up handing Atlantic 28 total projects under a contract that was supposed to cover just 5. That's almost 6 times what he signed up for. And that's not a record deal. That's exactly what he called it: modern-day slavery. The financial side of this situation is absolutely wild. Every project YoungBoy releases brings in millions, from streaming numbers to merch drops and even tour money. So when you realize that Atlantic could be profiting off 23 extra projects that don't count toward his freedom, you start to see how deep this goes. That's hundreds of millions in stolen value, money that should have been fueling his legacy, not padding corporate pockets. But here's what makes this whole thing even more mind-blowing. Despite all the exploitation, YoungBoy still came out on top. By 2022, he was officially the second most streamed artist on YouTube, sitting right behind Drake. And the craziest part? He did it with no label support, no radio airplay, and while being actively blackballed by the industry. That's raw, unfiltered power, proof that real connection with fans beats the fake industry machine every time. YoungBoy built his empire through pure consistency and direct connection. His YouTube game was revolutionary. He treated the platform like his own personal TV network, constantly dropping music videos, behind-the-scenes footage, and raw content that kept fans locked in 24/7. That steady grind created a movement, not just a fan base. And the ripple effects are still shaking the entire music business. More and more artists are now standing up, demanding ownership of their masters and refusing to fall for the same traps. Entertainment lawyers are dissecting these album versus mixtape loopholes, and labels are finally feeling the pressure. YoungBoy didn't just break records, he broke the system's illusion. He proved that success doesn't have to come from the machine, and that independence, consistency, and authenticity can turn an artist into a global powerhouse, no label strings attached. After YoungBoy blew the lid off his situation, the entire music industry was forced into conversations they never wanted to have. Suddenly, record labels were being pushed to talk about fair pay, ownership, and artist rights, topics they had been dodging for years. His revelations opened artists' eyes, and now new talent coming up in the game is asking real questions, reading contracts twice, and refusing to sign deals that don't respect their value. This whole wave of awareness can be traced right back to YoungBoy's decision to expose everything. He didn't just fight for himself, he changed how a generation of artists approached the business. Even veteran names started following his lead, standing up to their labels and demanding better treatment. The ripple effect was massive. One voice turned into a movement. When YoungBoy said, "Atlantic banned my music from all YouTubers, get a real job," he wasn't just venting. He was calling out another way the system failed its own artists. Reaction channels were out here making money off his songs while he wasn't seeing a dime. And the label? They didn't stop it, they didn't promote him, they just sat back and collected. That's wild. The irony couldn't be more real. Everyone else was eating off his work while he was still being held back by an unfair contract. This moment exposed yet another layer of dysfunction in the industry, how labels can rake in profits without offering real protection or support to the people actually creating the art. They want full control, but zero accountability. And YoungBoy's story made that impossible to ignore. But his impact didn't stop at music. It hit the culture as a whole. His struggle became a symbol of a much bigger problem: the exploitation of young black creators and entrepreneurs across all industries. His fight spoke to anyone who's ever been taken advantage of by a system that profits off their hustle while keeping them powerless. It wasn't just about beats and bars. It was about ownership, respect, and freedom. Today, YoungBoy's story stands as a warning for every up-and-coming artist thinking about signing to a major label. His words, "Don't sign to Atlantic, trust me," became more than just advice. They became a rallying cry for independence. Artists started realizing they don't have to stay silent out of fear of being blackballed. They can speak up, build their own lanes, and still win big. The silence that used to protect these corporations is finally breaking. Thanks to YoungBoy's courage, more artists are realizing that even if speaking out costs them in the short term, it's worth it for long-term freedom, ownership, and real change in the industry. YoungBoy proved something the industry never wanted to admit. Real artistry and true fan love can survive any kind of retaliation. Even with the entire system working against him, he showed that genuine connection beats corporate control every single time. Independent artists and young entrepreneurs started studying his every move, breaking down how he built his empire through direct engagement and ownership. His model became so powerful that even business schools and music programs started using it as a case study for how to win in the digital era without a label. He proved that the so-called middleman model, where labels act like gatekeepers, is quickly becoming obsolete. Artists no longer need a boardroom full of executives to reach fans when they can build empires directly from their phones. And because of YoungBoy's battle, entertainment lawyers are now stepping up too, using his case as legal ammo to challenge shady contract clauses. Some have even started winning cases based on the same arguments that his story brought to light. That's real impact in motion. YoungBoy's legacy here isn't just about his own fight for freedom. It's about tearing the mask off an entire system built to exploit young talent. For decades, labels have been taking the lion's share while tossing artists the leftovers. But YoungBoy showed the truth always finds a way to cut through the noise. Even when they tried to bury him through blackballing, control, and manipulation, his connection with fans kept him unstoppable. And that rumored $300 million he lost? It's way bigger than just money. That number represents the insane amount of value these labels drain from artists, generation after generation, while giving back crumbs. But by shining a light on their tactics, YoungBoy might have just saved countless artists from stepping into the same trap. His fight became a blueprint, a warning that's already protecting the next wave of creators coming up behind him. For real, this young king could have stayed quiet, played along, and cashed his checks. But instead, he risked everything to tell the truth. That's the kind of courage that changes entire industries. Atlantic thought they could silence him through shady deals and quiet blackballing, but they didn't understand one thing. You can't silence someone who has the people behind them. They underestimated the power of authenticity, and in doing so, they helped YoungBoy become something even greater, a symbol of independence, resistance, and artistic freedom. Now the story comes full circle, and the truth is louder than ever. What started as one artist's fight against a crooked deal has turned into a full-blown revolution in the music industry. YoungBoy didn't just call out Atlantic Records, he forced the entire world to look at how artists are treated behind the scenes. His name has become bigger than contracts, charts, or awards. It's become a warning and a wake-up call for anyone chasing fame without understanding the business. Ever since he broke free, you can feel the shift. Artists everywhere are speaking up, exposing label tricks, and demanding ownership of their work instead of begging for advances. Independent platforms are rising fast, and more creators are realizing they don't need a big label to reach millions anymore. The internet has flipped the game, and YoungBoy's blueprint showed exactly how to win without selling your soul. And let's not ignore the irony. Atlantic thought they could silence him, but their own actions ended up amplifying his voice. Every time they tried to block him, he came back stronger. Every time they cut off support, his fans doubled down and pushed him to new heights. It's like the system built to break him ended up proving his point that authenticity and consistency can't be stopped by corporate power. Now the new generation of artists is different. They're reading contracts, hiring lawyers, and owning their masters. They're building direct connections with fans, learning the business side, and taking control of their art before anyone else can touch it. You see it in how newer rappers talk, how they post, how they move. They're not chasing validation from labels anymore. They're chasing freedom, and that mindset, that's the real legacy YoungBoy left behind. Even outside of music, people are feeling his energy. Entrepreneurs, content creators, and influencers all over the world are quoting his story as motivation to stay independent and stay smart. His struggle became a symbol of standing your ground against the machine, no matter how powerful it seems. The system tried to label him as difficult or ungrateful, but history will remember him differently. As the one who sparked a movement for creative ownership, he showed that no matter how much money they wave in your face, it means nothing if you don't control your art, your name, and your future. So now when people say don't sign to Atlantic, it's more than a warning, it's a mindset. It's about knowing your worth, protecting your craft, and never letting anyone else dictate your destiny. YoungBoy's fight wasn't just about a contract, it was about freedom, respect, and the right to own what you create. And that's how one young artist from Baton Rouge turned his pain into power and changed the music industry forever. The game is changing for good, and it's all because artists like NBA YoungBoy refused to accept modern-day slavery disguised as record deals. He stood up to a billion-dollar machine and made the world see how deep the exploitation runs. His story isn't just about music anymore, it's about freedom, ownership, and real independence. YoungBoy's influence has now stretched far beyond hip-hop. He sparked a global conversation about fair business practices, generational wealth, and the importance of owning what you create. That's not just music talk, that's real-life power. He showed that being gangster isn't just about the streets, it's about standing your ground when the odds are stacked against you and refusing to let anyone profit off your pain. That's some real gangster energy right there. No cap. The movement he started keeps growing stronger every day. New artists are stepping up, naming him as the reason they stayed independent or fought for better contracts. His courage gave people a blueprint, not just for music, but for life. He taught a generation that speaking your truth, even when it costs you everything, can shake entire industries to their core. And that's exactly what happened. The truth hit harder than any hit single. He didn't just win streams of views, he won respect and changed the culture forever. Labels will think twice before pulling the same tricks, and fans are more aware than ever about who really owns the art they love. That's legacy, not just fame or fortune, but a shift in how the game is played. Because at the end of the day, the message is simple. Know your worth, own your work, protect your art. That's the future YoungBoy helped build, one where creators are finally in control of their destiny. So if this story opened your eyes or made you see the industry in a whole new light, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video to spread the truth. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think about NBA YoungBoy's fight for freedom. Do you think this is the start of a new era for artists? Let's keep this conversation alive and keep pushing for change, because the revolution in music isn't coming, it's already here.